This chart reading is for November 3rd, 1958 at 9:35 a.m. in Denver, Colorado. And okay, so you've got Scorpio Sun, Cancer Moon, Sagittarius rising. Um so just about that, well, and then you could see that everything, most of the planets were visible in the sky. Everything's kind of in the top half generally. Saturn was just rising, was about to rise above the eastern horizon, and then Mars had just set. But all the other planets were very visible in the sky, so you would be, um, it would be easier for you to establish communication with people, with like people that you don't know, or if you're in public or at work, you could be maybe more easily seen for what you are, I guess, and that would make it easier for you to be understood. You have Sun and Moon both in water signs, so um, the element of water represents emotion and intuition, and it's the most emotional element. But something I've noticed in particular with people who have Sun and Moon in water signs is that they actually come off very detached and logical, and they don't seem overly emotional at all to me. And I think that maybe it's just because there's a flow. When the Sun and Moon are both in agreement, they're both in water. Um, I don't know. There's just something that I'm still actually processing. Um, that maybe you could help me figure out, but there's this sort of detached objectivity with them, or this like actual like this realism with them. They're very pragmatic and realistic, and they can be very super logical and intelligent. I've noticed, and I'm not just trying to flatter you. This is something that I've noticed where they, um, like usually if someone just has their sun in a water sign and their moon is in a different element, they'll be very emotional and kind of unstable, and they could be nice people. That's a pretty vague placement. So there's a wide range within that, with all the sun signs and water, sun and water signs. But once you have both in there, yeah, it just makes people who are, they kind of have a different outlook, a unique take on the world, and they see things kind of holistically in a detached way. They could be kind of quirky and humorous. I think nothing really gets to them a lot because water is sort of like the wisest element. So I mean, maybe you're just more in line emotionally or intuitively, where you don't get so worked up over little things that other people might. Um, Also, the sun sort of represents the masculine energy in your chart. The moon represents the feminine. Sun is the outgoing part of your personality. Moon is the ingoing, introverted part of your personality. And then some people say the sun represents the father and the moon represents the mother. So because they aren't trining by aspect, because the sun is at 10 degrees Scorpio and moon is at 29 degrees Cancer, but they are trining by sign since they're both in water signs. So that would indicate that your parents probably got along when you were a child. That you grew up in a situation where you knew what was expected of you. And I've seen people who have sun and moon trining where they were just raised by one parent. But even then, there's like a focused, like like if you were raised by two parents, both your parents were probably somewhat more or less aligned. They had enough in common where you knew what was expected of you, and you had that consistency growing up. That's a pattern I've noticed to be true. Um, what else? And then I guess since I'm talking about childhood, I also look to your south node for childhood. So since your south node is in fifth house Aries, oh, I should mention too that I'm using equal houses, not Placidus. Most people use Placidus, but I use equal houses. Um, but anyway, so your north node is 11th house Libra, so that means your south node is fifth house Aries, and your south node is kind of like where you're coming from. People say that it represents like your past lives or things that you've mastered already, and then your north node is which is exactly opposite. It's always exactly the opposite, the south node, and the north node is kind of where you're evolving to, or something that you're not maybe naturally so good at, but that you could have potential skill in that area, and it would benefit you a lot to go in that direction. Um, so, but the South Node has a lot to do with your childhood, actually. So, because your South Node is in fifth house Aries, that's a very fiery place, very focused on the self and just fiery and impulsive and kind of rebellious. So that would kind of characterize your childhood to some extent. I could also look to the IC, which is opposite the MC. It's the little black triangle that's just to the right of the bottom, and that's also in Aries. So that would say that like the IC represents your childhood, and some people say it represents the mother or maternal influence in your upbringing. But because the South Node and the IC are both in Aries, that would indicate to me that you were a very fiery child. You were very precocious, and you were socially intelligent. You were adventurous, and you didn't want to be told what to do. And that you know could quickly figure out what the adults were doing and stuff like that. And but as you mature, you would become more like your North Node and more like your midheaven. So you'd become a little bit less like Aries and more like Libra. So a little bit less impulsive and more kind of cool and detached. And you might actually get a little bit more introverted as you get older and not be so, um, not be so, you know, extroverted and explosive and spontaneous and outgoing as a kid, and you know, like fiery and adventurous, maybe not so stable, just kind of more starting things and getting into things. So as you age and mature, you become more, maybe a little bit more detached, or more of, you'd take on more of an observational role a little bit. Um, just cool, calm, collected, that kind of thing. What else? And then, okay, something I noticed is that you've got, well, okay, a couple of things. So you've got a triple conjunction. So you have Jupiter and Venus conjunct your Sun. 'Cause Jupiter is only 1 degree away. Venus is 2 degrees away from your Sun. Um, so that means, so the Sun is like your ego and your the outgoing side of your personality. It's the casual side of your personality. So it's how people know you on a casual level. So friends or coworkers or acquaintances would know you by your Sun sign, and people who know you really well, like close friends and family, would know you more by your Moon sign. Um, but so your Sun is your ego, the outgoing part of yourself, the casual part of yourself, and it's in Scorpio, and you're probably a little bit familiar with that. But like Scorpio is known to be very intense and like secretive, and they have this like sexual, mysterious um reputation in astrology. A lot of times they're not so intense and crazy like they sound. Like sometimes they could be, but a lot of times they're kind of softies in a way, like they are kind of sensitive, but Scorpio has like the hard shell on the outside, so they, and Cancer is like that too. Cancer and Scorpio are both the only signs represented by animals that have shells. They have a soft, like Cancer the crab and Scorpio the scorpion both have soft insides and then a hard outside. Um, so in general, you might have, um, you know, you just might be more sensitive because they're both water signs. So they're, you know, water rules emotions. You might be more sensitive and emotional. You might be an empath. You know, feel what other people feel around you, and be very tuned into your environment. Be picking up on things that other people don't pick up on, or have your senses kind of overloaded from all the stimulus, because like I said, I've noticed double water signs to be intelligent, but I think it's kind of an emotional intelligence. That's what I'm suspecting. That you kind of just intuitively kind of figure your way through the world, or you kind of feel your way through the world. So I don't know if that makes sense, and I'm getting sidetracked here, but I was meaning to talk about this conjunction with your Sun. So the Sun is your casual, outgoing part of your personality, and because Venus not Mars, Venus and Jupiter are conjunct your Sun, um, the traits of Venus and Jupiter would kind of, you would take those on in your personality. So, um, so Venus conjunct your Sun would make you probably more attractive, make you maybe physically attractive, but also have an attractive personality when it comes to like, you know, you might be polite and just easygoing, easy to get along with, that kind of thing. Jupiter would do that too to some extent. That and it's all in the 11th house, and the 11th house is some astrologers say that's the most auspicious or like the best house because when you were born, the sun was rising, and it had already kind of gotten some distance off of the eastern horizon. So it was up in the sky enough to, that the day was lit up and that the sun was definitely up in the sky, but it was still rising or still gaining power. So I mean that applies to pretty much anything in the 11th house. That everything has, it's high enough to have power and to be seen very overtly, but it's also still gaining a lot of power. So that's why the 11th house has to do with hopes and dreams and aspirations, because you have power but you're still going up. So it's this like hopeful energy, and it's very visible. So it has to do with society and how people see you and stuff. Yeah, so you have this really nice conjunction there. Venus and Jupiter are both benefics, so they both rule abundance and luck, and they do have some uh, bad things associated with them, but generally speaking, they're two of the easiest planets to work with. They're very beneficial. So those conjunct your sun would mean, yeah, you just probably have an easygoing personality, probably just jovial, a little bit carefree, and that would kind of Scorpio could be kind of intense sometimes. So having that Venus Jupiter conjunction with your sun would kind of make you a little bit more easygoing, maybe than the average Scorpio. Not take things so seriously, because Scorpio can sometimes be in like almost a crisis mode where they're always trying to like figure everything out, and they can be a little bit paranoid, or it can be hard for them to relax a little bit. So that Jupiter sun or Jupiter Venus conjunction with your sun would kind of make you more easygoing, more friendly, more just jovial and a little bit more optimistic, so that it would kind of balance that out a little bit. Kind of bring some, just happy, easygoing, positive energy to the Scorpio. So it kind of bring out the more positive, or more, I don't want to say positive, but more carefree, lucky sides of Scorpio. Because Scorpio, as you know, it's kind of weird being born under the sign of Scorpio, just because it's the middle of fall. So you're being born and coming into the world and starting your life at a time where everything else is dying in the world generally. So that's why Scorpios can kind of have this like survivalistic aspect to them, or at least that's what I think, where they, they could be kind of more resilient than some of the other signs, but it could also be hard for them to relax, because they're, the energy of the middle of fall is like, you need to be in survival mode, or you need to be preparing for winter, and stuff like that. So they can, that could be good and bad. They can be very ambitious, and they're known for their what's the word, their perception. When they see into things, they could figure people out and figure things out. They could be psychological and see things, but that could also be bad if you almost a little bit like Virgo, where they, you can't just relax or just take things as they are. So I mean, there's always a pro and a con to it, I guess. But and then you have Mercury in Scorpios. You might have, especially in the 12th house, you might have kind of a dark sense of humor. Um, yeah, and you're probably intelligent, but it's an emotional intelligence, or it's an intuitive intelligence. So you just kind of pick up on things naturally. You're probably, like, if you do Myers-Briggs, I would suspect that maybe you're an intuitive person. So you kind of see the patterns behind things, rather than just seeing things in their physicality or just taking things at face value. You kind of would, read between the lines, or notice the patterns behind things, if that makes sense. You have Moon at 29 degrees Cancer. So the Moon was just about to leave. It's actually toward the end of the 29th degree. So some astrologers could say that the 29th degree of any sign is the critical degree, or it's a critical degree, which basically just means that, like, so being at the last degree of a sign is kind of intense, because that sign is ending. Endings can be kind of intense in general. So the Moon was like preparing to leave, and then often what happens at the very end of cycles in general, but including the end of signs, is that there's this like almost like a flashback experience, or there's this like, if you're experiencing it in a transit, you would you might have events play out that bring up all the themes of that whole cycle that you're about to complete. So being born with a planet such as the moon, even though the moon is not technically a planet, but in astrology we call it a planet, but being born with that natally, um, I don't. If you believe in reincarnation, it might indicate that this lifetime is sort of about. This lifetime is maybe the last one of a set of lifetimes where you're kind of concluding things, and it's like it's almost like the test at the end of the class or the end of the semester or whatever, where you have the finals, and and then you go over everything that you covered. You might have experiences like that, so experiences that tie into these very different themes from like other lifetimes, if you believe in that, um, or even if you don't want to take it to to a reincarnational side. The 29th degree just has this kind of intense energy, especially being at the end of a water sign, because water is the last element generally. Um, so there's just this kind of intensity there. So you might. I'm seeing that you're probably an easygoing person generally, but there's this kind of intensity there too, that you attract a certain intensity, or maybe you're able to see the more intense sides of reality that not everyone sees, something like that, or maybe you just attract to yourself very intense experiences. Maybe that's why you're easygoing, because you've been through a lot of intense experiences, or because generally you'd probably be a very soulful person, if that makes sense, or like an old soul. Sun and moon both in water, and then rising in fire. So you have a lot of, I don't want to say emotional because that's not a good enough word, but like um, emotional wisdom or intuitive wisdom. That just like you probably have a very soulful vibe. You probably have a really interesting life with like a whole range of different experiences, if that makes sense. Just because you know, because water signs in general, like they're very admirable, like they're very cool. Like you like water signs in general. I mean, obviously, you have every different kind of person. There could be good or bad people that are water signs, but in general, they could be very cool. But a lot of times they're like the twisted poet or the alcoholic artist or something like that, or they could be a comedian or something, but they've been through all this crazy stuff and this these messed up situations which made them such a cool person. So it's like that's intriguing and fascinating, and it makes an interesting person, but it's not always the most fun energy to deal with yourself, kind of. So that's just in general with all this watery energy, that's kind of what you might experience. um and okay, what else? Let me see. Neptune. Yeah, you have a whole stellium in Scorpio. I think you're meant to learn here. I guess everyone is, so that's kind of vague. But I mean, like, I think a lot of what your life here is about is just having all the different kinds of experiences that you can, and just, like it's more, your whole life is just this huge journey, and there's no real destination. It's just this long journey with all these different crazy experiences. And I think you're supposed to just obtain all different kinds of knowledge, mostly from experience, but it could be just from learning too in general. Just because of the water dominance, and then with Sagittarius rising, like your rising has a lot to do, like it is your first impression that you give on others and how you start things, but it also has a lot to do with your life mission and purpose. And Sagittarius is really just here to learn through experience. So you know go out and travel, or learn about different cultures or religions, or philosophies or theories or whatever. um, or just go out and have these different experiences just to learn from all of that, basically. So that's has a lot to do with your purpose here, I guess. And we all have multiple purposes, but that's just one that I would see for sure. You have Mars retrograde in Taurus, so you're probably not a dramatic person. You're not one to like start fights with people. Um, you probably hold your ground though pretty well, especially with all the Scorpio stuff, because you're kind of fixed. So you seem easygoing, but maybe a little bit stubborn because Scorpio is a fixed sign, so they're more consistent. Um, Cancer can be a little bit stubborn too, so you probably like familiarity a little bit. I feel like that's wrong. I'm saying that just because Scorpio and Cancer both like consistency generally, but the Sagittarius rising would kind of crave new experiences too, so it could be a combination, I guess. Okay, what else? What else? Lilith and Taurus, Mars and Taurus. So in relationships, I could see, like Venus and Mars tell me what kind of person you're attracted to, and then your descendant tells me what kind of person you would need in a long-term situation. Um, so Venus is in Scorpio, Mars is in Taurus. So that would make me think that you'd probably be attracted to more introverted personalities, people who are just kind of more low key and just chill and consistent. You know, not a very dramatic person. That would probably turn you off. You have Venus and Mars in detriment too, so you probably have a different take on relationships. Actually, from our conversation, that seems kind of obvious. You were already talking about that, but you have a different approach with relationships, maybe different opinions with relationships, or unconventional opinions with relationships, or the way you approach relationships is different than normal, or different than what is accepted by society. Because when you have placements that are in detriment, it kind of it kind of means that you represent or you work with themes, opinions, patterns, traits that are not accepted by society or that are like counterculture. So because Venus and Mars both have to do with relationships and they're both in detriment, your approach to relationships would be like counterculture or not not mainstream. Um, you you'd probably be very passionate in relationships. Venus and Scorpio is um, it's in detriment because Venus is typically just about like attracting abundance and just like Mars is the one that's ambitious and about going out and getting what you want, but Venus kind of gets what get it Venus, they're both about desire, but Mars is about getting what it desires like physically by going out and like taking it somehow or working for it or something like that. Venus is more about getting what it wants indirectly, so maybe just by being desirable yourself, you can attract to yourself what you want or who you want, or so that's generally the nature of Venus. But Venus is in a sign which is ruled by Mars. Um, so I mean, so I won't lie to you. Like Venus in Scorpio is generally known to be manipulative. That doesn't necessarily mean that you would be. Um, but like I think the reason for that is that okay, so like I was saying, Venus is generally more peaceful and just about attracting to it what it wants, and it's kind of love and abundance and all these kind of lighter, easy themes. But like I was saying, Scorpio is more about surviving and preparing for winter, and it's it's not about just relaxing and attracting to you what you want just by being desirable or whatever. It's about like getting out there and figuring stuff out and like being. I don't want to say being real because I don't want to imply that Venus isn't being real, but it's just two very different sides to reality. So so you're bringing that kind of survivalistic energy into your relationships with Venus and Scorpio. So it might be hard for you to accept love in a relationship, and hopefully that's okay for me to say. Or some people with Venus in Scorpio could be manipulative, but I think that's just it's just an aspect of having a hard time being secure or comfortable in relationships, and feeling like, because Scorpio would feel like you have to figure something out or try to control the situation. um, so it might be hard for you to just relax, but one of the plus sides to having Venus in Scorpio is it's extremely passionate. So if you have feelings for someone, it would consume you. Like you would obsess over them. And that could be good or bad too. Like it could be, you could have like the whole that it could be like a drug, like the high that you feel from your affection for someone, or that someone makes you feel. That could be good. That could be intense and amazing to experience, and you could attract really intense and amazing relationships or dynamics with people. But it could be hard to, you feel out of control in relationships, so that'd be kind of difficult too. Um, Venus and Scorpio. But you would be attracted to people who are, maybe people who have placements in Scorpio or Taurus or both. So someone pragmatic and maybe a little bit on the introverted side, who knows their boundaries well, who's just kind of stable and consistent, and um, not someone super cocky or flamboyant or flashy. Someone just who knows themselves and is just chill and just strong and resilient in themselves. That's the kind of personality that you would be attracted to. That's how I would read that. But then your descendant, so the descendant is the black triangle on the right. Also, I know most astrologers use Astrodienst, and this chart is from Astro Theme. This is just what I use, so if that throws you off, like sorry, but this is what I use. So, the black triangle on the right side is your descendant. It's always exactly opposite your ascendant, and the ascendant is on the left side. It's AC. So because you have rising or ascendant in Sagittarius, that means your descendant is Gemini. So, like your ascendant kind of rules your identity. It's your first house cusp, rules yourself and your identity. Um, the sun rules your identity too, but in kind of a different way. So your ascendant is Sagittarius, so that's kind of you. You're like Sagittarius. In ancient times, you would be called, instead of going by your sun sign like we do today, you'd be called your rising sign. So you would literally be called a Sagittarius. There's a factoid there, but basically what I'm saying is you're a Sagittarius, and then opposite that is your like partner. And even if you don't have a partner, it could be just any person that you work with in a one-on-one situation. So, business partner, or maybe one sibling that you're close to, or a really close, like a best friend or something. Anyone you work with one-on-one, you would generally attract Gemini personalities. Um, so and you might literally have a relationship with someone who is a Gemini or has moon in Gemini or a stellium in Gemini or something like that. Or if they could have different astrology, but if they end up having certain themes or personality traits that are like Gemini, that would work too. So maybe someone who is just airy or someone who's mutable or something like that. Um, so you're probably attracted to someone who's intelligent, who's kind of unique and is an individual thinker who has their own opinions. Maybe someone who's adventurous like you are, because Sagittarius and Gemini kind of both share that they want to learn and have adventures and stuff like that. So, someone who could engage you and stuff like that, and maybe someone philosophical, because Gemini and Sagittarius are both about learning ideas and thoughts, ideas, concepts, as well as exploring the world and having different experiences that way. They're both very much about learning and about expansion in different ways. Um, or, yeah, I guess there's different ways that could play out, but um, Gemini. Sometimes it could be a really chatty person. Gemini is known to be chatty. Someone sociable, chatty. It's a lot of a good conversationalist, someone to talk about interesting things, not just like small talk. Small talk might turn you off, especially with the rest of your astrology anyway, since you're so watery. You look like a deep person, so you probably want to talk about meaningful concepts, not just, you might get bored of just light chit chat. And Gemini is known for their conversational abilities. So in the long term, in a long term situation, you would need to be with someone who is maybe has many different sides to their personality, or who is constantly changing, because you need that stimulus, or you need that um, something that's not just the same all the time, someone who's actually interesting. So you're attracted in the short term, you're attracted to someone who is very stable and consistent, and safe and pragmatic, and sensual and sensible. But in the long term, you need someone who's also interesting and multifaceted, someone with different various hobbies or interests, or someone who's changeable, or always learning or evolving. That way you can always be learning and evolving too, if that makes sense. Um, okay, what else? Okay. Uh, oh, you have Saturn in the first house, and Saturn's actually pretty close to your rising. It's only 8 degrees, or I can't do math. 6 degrees after your rising. And whatever is in your first house kind of characterizes your personality. Kind of like how I said Venus and Jupiter conjunct the sun. That means you kind of take on traits of Venus and Jupiter, so more attractive and easygoing, jovial, etc. Saturn's in your first house, so that would mean you kind of take on the traits of Saturn as well. So you might be kind of hard on yourself. Saturn in the first house is it's ruthlessly self-critical. Um, so especially from an early age, this might be hard for you, where you are. It could give you anxiety or something, or give you even depression or something, just because you're so self-critical. The good thing is that right from the start, it makes you humble, so that's good. You're probably a very humble person anyway with all your water stuff. But you could be maybe too humble, too hard on yourself. But this is something, anything having to do with Saturn benefits you with time. So it's really difficult at first. Wherever you have Saturn is a difficult area when you're younger. But once you get older, especially after you turn 30, because that's after your first Saturn return, and then after your second Saturn return when you're like late 50s or 60, and then if you live for a third Saturn return once you're 90, just and it just in general with time, like the more you have Saturn transits and the more time just goes on in general, you would become really strong in that area. So when you're young, you might have problems being too self-critical. But as you mature, you would learn to get this really healthy, ideally, you'd get this really healthy self esteem or self respect, or this healthy self image, I guess. And then be able to project true confidence as you get older. Um, yeah, maintain that humility, but also gain the confidence. So that's generally something that you would just naturally kind of work through as you get older. Um, I'm thinking Saturn in Sagittarius first house. You might have a thing with traveling where you like want to travel and explore the world, but at a young age, maybe something prevents you from doing that, or you have just an inhibition when it comes to traveling or experiencing new things. So again, as you get older, you would kind of learn to get past that, or learn to you probably learn a lot from just traveling and having different experiences like that, since Saturn and your rising are in Sagittarius. Oh, and you just had a Saturn return about 6 years ago, so or maybe less than that, 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that. So you probably just had an experience where you matured a lot, because that's what Saturn returns do. A Saturn return is where Saturn goes all the way around the chart, all the way around the sun, back to exactly where it was in the sky when you were born. Um, so you probably just had your second Saturn return. Yeah, so what that does is it makes you more mature, more self reliant, and for you personally, it would make you more able to I guess travel, like I said, or have new experiences, or maybe open you up to things that you wouldn't normally do, or get you out of your comfort zone a little bit, something like that. Open you to new cultures or experiences or ideas or something like that. Um, see what else. I think I covered most of everything. I don't even know how long this is now, but yeah, that's most of what I see. Mars in sixth house. You might have accents throughout your life at work, like violent accents, just in your place of work. I could also talk to you about your career a little bit more. You have, so the second house cusp is how you make money, and the midheaven or the 10th house cusp is your career, because those two things might be aligned, but sometimes they're aligned, but sometimes they're different. Like, sometimes you might be better at making money in one area, but then what you really want to pursue in life is a different thing, and sometimes they're the same. And then the 6th house cusp is in Taurus, so that's kind of your day job. Like 10th house cusp is your career, 6th house cusp is your day job in a way. So you have your 2nd house cusp in Capricorn. So maybe when you were younger, it might have been hard for you to make money. You might have been kind of poor at an early age, and you would have to make your own money for sure. You'd have to learn how to, like you'd be the self-made man kind of, I guess, if that makes sense, when it financially. Yeah. So however you make money, you're doing it on your own. You're not cheating or just doing something really easy. You might have to do physical hard labor or run your own business or something, or do something on your own where you're really earning that money yourself. You have 10th house cusp in Virgo, but then midheaven in Libra. So okay, and then your midheaven is ruled by Venus, which is in Scorpio 11th house. 10th house cusp is Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury, which is also in Scorpio. I think so. I think you would just naturally find your career in life, because it has a lot to do with your just basic personality. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but like just being yourself would naturally guide you to your career. I know that sounds kind of vague. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's not true for everyone. Some people have to really look for their career, and it's hard to decide what to do. But I think for you, it would kind of happen naturally. 10th house. I mean, you're probably good at working with people, and being social. You're probably a hard worker. You're probably not afraid of hard work. 10th house. Venus also rules your 6th house of work. So maybe you could have some kind of job that's like frowned upon, or um not super mainstream. So probably not like a doctor or lawyer or something. You could have some kind of job. I don't know what that would be though, so I'm not sure exactly how to interpret that. But um, some kind of like counterculture job, or something that people wouldn't normally expect, or something like that. There might be something like that having to do with your line of work, but it's something that aligns with you very well. Um, it fits with your the basic parts of your core personality. Your line of work probably fits with very well. I don't know if that makes sense at all. Um, 10th house cusp Virgo. So it could be physical work, or working with your mind. I do think you'd have a lot of like physical labor at some point in your life, because there's a lot of earth, on your on these money house cusps. Um, where's the 8th house cusp? 8th house cusp is Cancer. Mm, yeah, so maybe, I don't know, doing physical labor or building something, or um, I'm not sure exactly, but you know, probably be hard work at some point in your life. But you'd also be good at working with people. You'd probably also be good at customer service, or just working one on one with people. And that, there could be a lot of jobs that fit that, I guess. But so I'm not sure. Hopefully that makes sense. But um, probably a very sensual person. Like, you like to touch people. You have Mars and Lilith in Taurus, which is very sensual, and Venus in Scorpio, which is kind of sensual too, but in a more emotional way, or intense emotional way. So like even if it's just in a friendly way, like hugging or something like that, like touching people might make you feel closer to them or something like that. Okay, that's pretty much what I see. So let me know if any of that makes sense. And yeah, and if you have any questions, there's always more nooks and crannies that I could get into. If you want to know about anything specifically, yeah, that's pretty much what I see. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know. Yeah, thanks for the chart.